The first stop was this place called San Marcos de la Laguna. Does anyone know about that? Have anyone been there before? Yeah, okay, so super magical little town on this volcanic lake in Guatemala. The kind of place that's just like long stares of people and like hugs, and everyone's eating cacao superfood bliss balls and going to like conscious prodding workshops all day. It's just like a blissed out town. And I was living in an apartment for like 2 weeks. I decided to just get down there and rent an Airbnb, like 2-room apartment with a whole backyard for like $40 a night, and just spend the holidays down there and get out, just sort of land. And my roommate, as it turned out, was a girl I met like on Facebook who wanted to take the other room, was this Russian tantrika, and she was completely crazy and awesome. And she had it's amazing her story comes up in the book, but she had it all. She was the wife of a Russian oligarch, and she was on a yacht in the south of France when she just like was eating like caviar and champagne, wanting to like vomit because of all of this like unhappiness that she felt. And this guy couldn't understand it at all, like why she was so unhappy. And there she was, like on his yacht in the south of Spain. So one day she got her passport, put it in a Ziploc, got on a floaty, and got to shore and escaped her Russian oligarch husband in a bikini, and a floaty, and her passport in a Ziploc. So she was a total badass, and she ended up in Ibiza and created a hair feather company that was now international, and she had like employees working for her, and she travels the world selling hair feathers and feeling free like as a bird. So it was a really beautiful story. And so she was my roommate, and we get into all sorts of mischief and bizarre workshops and things. But so I'm going to tell you the next little reading is a chapter from that portion of time that I spent in San Marcos. And it's called Meet My Grandma, Chapter 7, Meet My Grandma. When I woke up, I had no idea that the day would involve getting intimate with a butch, hairy-chested, bald man, as that just typically wasn't my sort of thing. As I walked towards town to find some breakfast, I met a friendly older guy with an impressive beard whose daughter had wanted to visit Guatemala. So concerned for her safety and looking for an adventure, he had decided to drive her down from Texas on his motorcycle. As I talked with him, listening to his tales of travels through dusty Mexican towns and negotiating with crooked border officials, my desire for a two-wheeled adventurer was reawakened. After parting ways with the bearded adventurer, I found a cafe run by a lean blonde man who also taught Pilates above the cafe. He had a slightly unsavory vibe, but he ran a tight ship, and the tipico that I ordered was superb. The meal consisted of bright yellowed scrambled eggs, sliced avocado, 2 strips of fried plantain, a slice of local fresh cheese, and a generous portion of warm blue corn tortillas. This breakfast was found almost anywhere throughout Central America and became a regular way to start my day. I struck up a conversation with the girl next to me and proceeded with the typical backpacker volley of information. Where are you from? How long have you been traveling? How much longer will you travel for? It was all a little bit repetitive, but she was friendly, and we soon found that we had a bunch of things in common. We both enjoyed being solo travelers, getting dropped into strange new cultures, and having to make friends and learn how to get by. There was something thrilling about it. As a young boy, I'd been moved around a lot, so I learned to embrace the challenge and to enjoy novel experiences, or at least tolerate them when they were less than ideal. In my earlier days on the road, I'd gravitate toward the party crowd, often the loudest and hence easiest crowd to find. New friendships forged through blurry nights of drinking games, bar hopping, and hungover sightseeing during the day. Now in my late 30s, my trick is to find the yoga studios, look at their notice boards, take a class or two, talk with some bright-eyed, healthy folk, and find out what's going on in the neighborhood. Worst case, say if there's no local yoga studio, you can still usually find the health-conscious folks congregating at vegetarian restaurants or upscale coffee shops that serve alternative wide array of non-dairy milks. Here in San Marcos, it wasn't hard to find them at all because the entire town felt like a living, breathing, transformational workshop. After breakfast, I strolled down the muraled alleys to the large notice board that I'd seen upon my arrival and began perusing the town's offerings. A tapestry of overlapping flyers promised every sort of esoteric and consciousness prodding gathering. On a whim, I decided to head to a conscious touch workshop led by my friend Sharon, an LA Tantra teacher who I'd run into at the cacao dance a few days earlier. So I wove my way through some flowery paths and into the gardens of the Ananda Wellness Center. It was a thoroughly pleasant environment, right on the water, gentle waves lapping at the shore with reeds swaying in the breeze as sun glittered on the surface of the crystal blue lake. About 8 people had shown up for the workshop, and to my surprise and slight dismay, almost all of them were men. That's okay. Most of the guys who show up at a Conscious Touch workshop are probably the pretty heart-open, easygoing type, so it shouldn't be too awkward. Sharon, an excitable and vivacious blonde, projected full embodiment in her sexuality, as teachers of workshops like this often do. As we sat down, she launched into her introduction. "Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to have you all here. Yay!" She clapped. "This is actually my first workshop that I ever taught in San Marcos, so double yay." To call her bubbly would be an understatement. The woman was effervescent to a fault. I know I called it Conscious Touch, but what we're really going to be doing today is Tantra." She giggled as some of the men in the group exchanged nervous smiles. However, they wouldn't let me call it Tantra, so don't tell anyone that you went to a Tantra massage workshop. Apparently, San Marcos, for all its openness, possessed a strict judgment towards the word Tantra. Some years back, as a horde of New Age healers and gurus had flooded the sleepy lakeside town, there'd been some rather dubious teachers that had established reputations for being a little too involved in their students' progress. I hadn't heard the full story, but I was already well aware that teaching Tantra was historically a very rocky affair, especially for male teachers. In our culture, there is certainly a lot of healing that needs to be done, and a huge and often unspoken part of it surrounds our sexuality. Many people, often due to trauma of one form or another, suffer from a restricted or even completely blocked connection to their sexuality. And while there are certainly techniques for healing this trauma, some might appear to the uninitiated public as inappropriate or downright immoral, occasionally prompting them to start rumors. Sometimes the student, exposed to a sudden and unfamiliar rush of sexual response, can become very shocked and even recoil from the experience, directing accusations towards the workshop or the teacher. Some students, newly liberated from their repressed sexuality, might become romantically attached to their well-intentioned teachers, only to later report them when their love went unreturned. And then, of course, there was certainly the blatantly inappropriate teachers who abuse their position of power and who rightfully get exposed and labeled as sexual predators. Regardless of whatever happened in this case, it left most of San Marcos reluctant to use the term Tantra ever again. So here we were, a group of mostly men at a Conscious Touch and definitely not Tantra workshop. "And how exciting that we're mostly men," Sharon quipped gleefully. "I love teaching men. I find women are a lot more open to many of these practices already, so it's great for guys to be putting in the extra effort to get in touch with their sensitive sides." The smile on her face seemed to know no bounds, and she talked in all caps. "And don't worry, guys, we're all going to get turns with all different partners." We broke the circle into pairs and sat cross-legged facing each other as the exercises began. The first exercise was deep eye-gazing for minutes on end. The initial awkwardness quickly subsided, and besides the occasional loop of smirks, my partner, a lanky Dutch fellow named Niels, remained calm and connected. At times, his face seemed to vanish, and all that was left was a narrow tunnel into his left eye, upon which my focus was directed. After that, we switched partners, and this time we were instructed to extend one hand onto the other's heart while still eye-gazing as a way to deepen the connection. The next round, in which I was partnered up with a tanned Spanish man, was all about asking consent and handling rejection. We each got to ask each other if we could touch certain parts of their body, to which the other person would say no. The rejected person would then respond by saying, "Thank you for expressing your boundaries." Sharon clapped and squealed, "Consent is super sexy, everybody!" We moved on to our next partner, and I found myself sitting across from a very pretty German girl. Once again, we were instructed to practice asking for consent, and this time the other person got to choose whether or not to give it. She was strikingly beautiful, and I felt a rush of excitement as we began. Almost immediately, however, I could tell she was a little uncomfortable. While she was bold enough to both give and receive openly during the exercise, even this basic level of intimacy was obviously intense for her. I tempered my initial excitement, calming my instinctual desires, and turning the focus of my energy towards more of a soothing, fraternal expression of love. "Okay, everyone, are you having fun? You're all doing so great. It's time for your next partner." The sweet German girl moved along, and now facing me was a burly, hairy-chested, bald man named Chris, who I recognized from the new moon ceremony a few days earlier at the tribal village. Okay, great. Now that we're all warmed up and feeling yummy, important side note, the Tantra teachers like to use the word yummy almost as much as they like to use the word juicy. Now it's time to move on to the main course of the workshop, the 5 elements Tantra massage. I smiled. Chris smiled back. The two of us, our bald heads, broad furry chests and all, we're going to be partners for an activity called the 5 elements Tantra massage. I was first to lie on my back and receive the massage, which was intended to take the recipient on a journey through different styles of touch as related to the 5 elements. I closed my eyes as Chris started with the earth element, which was expressed as a powerful, deep tissue massage. Chris wasn't shy and made sure to get really into it, massaging my entire body while narrowly avoiding my nipples and genitals. He had large, strong hands. The next element was water, and Chris's hands washed over me, still forceful but more flowy this time. Fire, the next element, was more choppy and sharp, pokey and slappy, and Chris shook and rattled me, which I especially enjoyed as it seemed to wake up and activate parts of my body that had felt a little sleepy. The 4th element was air, which moved over the surface of my body like a gentle breeze, and Chris amplified the sensation by lightly blowing on my skin. I'd lost myself in the moment. It felt so good that I felt my sexuality begin to wake up, and all of a sudden I was thinking, please don't get an erection in the Conscious Touch workshop with Chris. Don't get me wrong, he seemed pretty cool, and he may not even have minded, but still, I had just met him, and getting an erection in a class of strangers still seemed a little bit inappropriate. I moved my attention to things that dulled my sexual excitement, in this case, scrambled eggs and wrinkly old men. Not that I don't like either of them, just not usually in a sexual context. I took some deep breaths and felt relieved as my erection began to subside. It must have been quite a scene for any onlooker to watch these 2 large, hairy bears share such an intimate and tender moment with each other. Luckily, the last element, ether, was more hands-off, and Chris passed his hands above my body, hovering a few inches from its surface, while being instructed to project loving intention towards me. But try as I might, I didn't feel much. Maybe I'm not sensitive enough to feel that level of subtlety, I wondered. Or maybe I'm a little suspicious about energy work in general. Are people really feeling anything or just imagining it? On the other hand, does successfully imagining a feeling make that feeling any less real? I decided to remain open to a continued exploration of the energetic realm. We switched roles, and I attempted to treat my new intimate man friend Chris as lovingly as he just treated me. Thank you very much. So you never find out how I meet my grandma, but so a reason why you got to get the book. The topic of the title. So that's, first of all, San Marcos de la Laguna, an amazing place on Lake Atitlan. If you ever get the chance to go, it's like there's so many crazy things happening everywhere. Some of the stories that I got into, besides like these wild, everyone's blissed out of their minds on cacao. Like you can't do anything without cacao. It's like, oh, it's the yoga class with cacao. It's ecstatic dance with cacao. It's like we're just hanging out with cacao. It's like everyone constantly was like totally just in the heart open space, like rolling around that town. It's a wild place. And any type of workshop that you can imagine is available. You know, I went to this wild workshop about astral projection in this wooden pyramid. I did like breath, like this stuff called rebirthing breath work, which is wild. Has anyone done breath work, holotropic or rebirthing stuff? Yeah, wild things. And I put that in the story too. So anyways, it's a really wild town if you ever get a chance to go down. Thank you guys.